It's ripping my heart out, thinking of you, wondering how you grew so strong. I'm tearing your heart out, thinking of me, living so thoughtlessly, doing you wrong, doing you wrong, doing you wrong, doing you wrong. My life out of balance, survival my call, never questioning what I'm turning into, fitting in this culture, my constant goal, all the lives I undo, doing you wrong, doing you wrong, doing you wrong, doing you wrong. You're slipping away now, out of my grasp. I've no idea how or what I've done. I can't live without you, baby. Hubris aside, I can't breathe without you, honey. There's nowhere to hide, and soon I'll find I can't run. Doing you wrong, doing you wrong, doing you wrong, doing you wrong. You're slipping away now, out of my grasp. I've no idea how or what I've done. I can't live without you, baby. Hubris aside, I can't breathe without you, honey. There's nowhere to hide, and soon I'll find I can't run.
Thank you, everybody, for joining today, and I apologize for our late start time. Special thanks to the new members of the Nature Bats Last YouTube channel who have joined since the last time we did a live stream, going back about 10 days. Those people include Joe Esposito, Trent Black, Jacqueline McKenzie, Paul Howard, Eric Genest, Grateful Dan, Looking for Truth, No Representation, ELSI, Smilin' Jack, Robert Frayne, and Susan LeCamp. Thanks to each and every one of you. Oh, and also thanks to David Jenkins, who just joined right before we got on the air here. Thanks also to Steve Pike for the generous direct donation. I see Kevin Hester has the first question. On the December episode of NBL, we discussed the Atlantification of the Arctic. Do you expect Corey Bradshaw's extinction cascades to start soon in the region? Yes, I expect them to start soon. In fact, I suspect they have already started. It's a bad time of year for taking measurements there right now. And I can't imagine that we have had the Atlantification of the Arctic that has been reported in the peer-reviewed literature and not have triggered extinction events already for who knows how many species. I referred people to an article in The Independent that pointed to a paper in Nature Climate Change. That article in The Independent indicates the last 14 years have seen the 14 lowest levels of Arctic sea ice in the modern satellite record, that satellite record going back to 1979. And also, in the last 10 years, warming in the Arctic has outpaced projections so rapidly that scientists are now suggesting the poles are warming 4 times faster than the rest of the globe. And scientists have been indicating as much for the last few years. This has led to glacier melt and permafrost thaw levels that weren't forecast to happen until always far into the future, 2050 or later. So that should come as no surprise to the people who have been following Nature Bats Last for a while. Of particular note, from the peer-reviewed paper in Nature Climate Change by lead author Takamasa Tsubauchi, and I'm undoubtedly pronouncing that incorrectly. The take-home message here is from the abstract, where the authors write, ocean heat transport may therefore have been a major contributor to climate change since the late 1990s. And it was recently reported that the last 25 years, which takes us back to the mid-1990s, have indicated more greenhouse gas emissions than in the previous time since the Industrial Revolution began. So from 1750 till roughly 1995, those carbon dioxide emissions were surpassed by CO2 emissions from 1995 to the current day. So we shouldn't be surprised that profound changes in the environment are underway as a consequence. The only major item that really stuck out to me from the paper that you can't see if you only have access to the abstract is in the section called Wider Implications. And it's talking about the AMOC. The AMOC is the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, which refers to the circulation pattern in the Atlantic Ocean. And the paper indicates the AMOC transports warm water northward in the Atlantic Ocean and is a crucial component of the climate system. In a warming climate, the AMOC is expected to weaken, and they cite the IPCC for this, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Measurements from a mooring array at 26.5 degrees north indicate that the AMOC has been in a reduced state since 2008. So now a dozen years that the AMOC has been in a reduced state is weakening. By contrast, the exchange flow exhibited in this paper has been stable or slightly increased since 1992. And our results demonstrate that the ocean heat transport across the ridge has increased. This apparent disconnect between a stable overturning at high latitude and a weakened circulation at mid-latitude in the Atlantic Ocean is not well understood, but of key importance for accurate predictions of future climate states. And this is a hint that the overturning of the AMOC will not lead to a rapid cooling, as was believed for quite a long time. That might not be the case. It might, in fact, not lead to that rapid cooling and instead continue to warm, or at least stabilize at a high temperature as the AMOC figures out what is going to happen next. So I think this is another case of warming winning out over cooling regionally and ultimately at the global level.
Is that the picture you want to show, like the squiggly lines?
Yeah, yeah. Let's show the squiggly lines picture right now. That's from the peer-reviewed article, and I included it in the description on NatureBats Last on GuyMcPherson.com. So that's where you can find links to the papers that I've mentioned here, as well as to this figure that Pauline is about to put up on the screen. Beth asks, there's been a noticeable increase of the appearance of earthquakes. Can you provide some light on that situation? Yes, this is not a surprise. And it's almost certainly a result of the shifting of the continental plates. In particular, around the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire is around or on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. And as ice melts, that water pours off of the terrestrial regions, such as North America, where glaciers are melting. Water is heavy, so that water in the form of melted ice is flowing off of the Northern American region and lightening up that region. And at the same time, all that water, which is very heavy, is flowing into the Pacific Ocean. So those two plates are going like this. The North American plate is rising as it gets lighter, and the Pacific plate, the plate with the Pacific Ocean, is getting heavier, so it's going down like this. And right here is where that friction is going on, and that is causing increased earthquakes and increased volcanic activity as well. So when we're just drinking a glass of water, it seems like water is not very heavy, but we're talking about a lot of water. And at roughly 8 pounds per gallon, or 1 kilogram per liter, that adds up. For a few years while I was on campus at the University of Arizona, I conducted field research with some students that involved manipulating the water cycle. So we built these enormous rainout shelters that kept the rain from falling in a specific location, and then we put water back in to various plots underneath the rainout shelters in patterns consistent with the typical year in the region, as well as declining or increasing events and amount of precipitation during the events. So what that meant was we were hauling a lot of water, truckloads full of water. And even though it was a relatively small field experiment, it still required many thousands of gallons of water each time we made the trip out to manipulate the precipitation regime, the water cycle. And so you get an understanding of how heavy water is when you've conducted research and you're carrying water around. Also, in my days as a firefighter, you get a really good idea for how heavy water is when you have to carry every gallon to the fire, and it's quite a ways. Yes. Let's play that video that I asked people to watch. Yeah, the science update before starting this. So this is just a 3 or 4 minute video that provides an overview of the conversation today. Take it away, Pauline. Good Wednesday morning. It's December 2nd, 2020, here in Central Florida in the United States. Guy McPherson of GuyMcPherson.com, otherwise known as Nature Bats Last, and I'm providing a science update. The title of this science update is important to keep track of because you can go to GuyMcPherson.com and find the information, including the links to the articles I'm going to mention, and also figures from those articles. Science update is on the blog, GuyMcPherson.com, is titled Atlantic Heat Blob Drives Loss of Arctic Ice, Microbes Awaken. So I'm presenting two related stories here today. One reported in The Independent, growing heat blob from Atlantic driving sea ice loss in Arctic, study says. And the study in question is a paper in Nature Climate Change published on November 23rd, 2020. In the Independent article, it is pointed out that the last 14 years have seen the 14 lowest levels of Arctic sea ice in the modern satellite record. Modern satellite record goes back to 1979. The paper in Nature Climate Change. Well, that was really choppy because the telecommunications infrastructure here is very poor, so we decided to stop it. You can take a look at that anytime. It's at GuyMcPherson.com, and it's still on top of the page. There are links to 2 or 3 articles and a link to the video, the science update video as well. Jeremy asks, when I was born, the parts per million, I assume we're talking about carbon dioxide here, was apparently 300 parts per million. It is now 410 parts per million. It's actually above that. It's above 415 parts per million. What is direct impact and result of this change? Carbon dioxide is the best known of the more than 40 greenhouse gases, and it provides a profound warming impact and is largely responsible for the term greenhouse effect being used to refer to what's going on Earth. So light from the sun goes through the atmosphere, strikes the Earth, and particularly the terrestrial regions warm up. The oceans warm too, and a vast majority, more than 90%, of the warming initially occurs in the oceans. But we really notice it when it affects land, because the warming land is what produces the high temperatures and therefore potentially lethal conditions for humans. So the sunlight strikes the Earth, warms up the Earth, and if there were no greenhouse gases, if there was no carbon dioxide and water vapor and methane and many other greenhouse gases, then the light that heated the Earth would be lost to space and there would be no warming. So it is a result of these greenhouse gases that allow life to persist here on Earth. They keep it warm, and they act as something of a blanket, those greenhouse gases. Once the Earth is warmed by the sun, then some of that radiation cannot escape back out into space. It's trapped by the greenhouse gases, thus the term greenhouse effect. If you've ever been in a greenhouse or gotten into your car on a cool winter day, you know that it's much warmer inside the car or inside the greenhouse than it is outside. And that's because that energy cannot escape, at least not all of it. So the implication of the greenhouse effect is it allows for survival of many species, including ours, on Earth. The impact of increased greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is to continue to heat, and in the case of what's going on right now on Earth, to overheat the Earth. So we have an overheated planet right now that is only getting hotter. There's no proven way to stabilize global average temperature or reduce the temperature of the planet. So because we have, quote, too many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the planet continues to warm. So the direct impact is continued warming. The indirect impacts include a warmer Earth is a wetter Earth, as climate scientists have known for many decades, and so there is more precipitation than there used to be. In addition, some places are drier than they used to be because of overall circulation patterns of the planet. So some places are drier. Most of the planet is wetter. Overall, the planet is experiencing more precipitation than it did when we had only 300 or even 350 parts per million carbon dioxide. Remember, James Hansen indicated that really we need to have about 280 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. That's how we started this planet at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, was 280 parts per million. And Hansen indicated that 350 parts per million was the absolute upper limit, beyond which would cause devastating consequences for humans on Earth. And sure enough, we're there. We are seeing devastating consequences all over the planet at this point. And we will continue to see increased warming and therefore increased intensity of storms, increased intensity of droughts, and so on, all of the short-term side effects that come from a warming planet, and at this point, overheated planet. Audrey writes, I was surprised to see that geoengineering has been discussed in the 1960s when U.S. scientists suggested floating billions of white golf ball type objects to increase albedo. Yes, geoengineering has been, we're really a Star Wars / Star Trek society. We've been reading science fiction novels, most of us, our entire lives. We've had access to them since major successful fantasy / sci-fi writers emerged in the 1940s and 50s. So it's not a big surprise with the likes of Ray Bradbury and Aldous Huxley and somebody help me out here.
Humidity, storm,
No.
flooding.
I'm thinking about science fiction writers, and
Murder.
you're talking about what happens as a result. Anyway, major science fiction writers in the 1940s and 1950s had us adopt this science fiction culture. And then along come television shows and movies that portray that image even more. And so it's no big surprise that, and also given the hubris associated with being human, it's no big surprise that we think we can do anything, that we think we can throw some white golf ball type objects out there on the planet and therefore cool the planet as a result. And I would suggest, had that idea been taken seriously and if we had taken a Manhattan Project approach to it, as we did, with respect to nuclear weaponry during World War II, then I suspect we might have been able to turn this overheating of the planet idea around by this point. But we didn't. Nearly as I can tell, people just thought we would fix it later, that we have access to the kind of technology that allows us, but mostly it's the kind of hubris that allows us to think we can do anything. And no matter what mistakes we make, we can fix them at some point in the future. So that's too bad. Oh, and the third, I believe it's the third paper I asked you to read, was from Scientific American. Deep frozen Arctic microbes are waking up. I'm reminded of this because Poolbal says maybe the methane-eating bacteria are going to save us. And some of these microbes are already known to science. Others are not, that we are seeing emerge right now. And some of them release methane and others consume methane, as pointed out in the article. And so it could be, and this is the kind of approach humans have always taken to these sorts of problems, it could be that the microbes will save the day. It could be that we are able to promote the spread of enough of these methane-eating bacteria and microbes that they will make a significant dent. That's the Star Wars, Star Trek, science fiction perspective that we seem to have adopted. So it could be that science fact will save the day. I wouldn't bet on it. Okay. Poole writes, I think the extinction chance is now 50%. Do you mean for now? Today? Or maybe by Tuesday? I think the extinction chance is 100%, as it has been with every other species that has ever occupied this planet, except for the relatively few that are present here today. All species go extinct. The only question is a matter of timing. Will our species go extinct? Yes, of course.
Did you see what Audrey said? About geoengineering being debated since the 60s?
Even talked about it.
Yeah.
At length.
Well, I was off in another planet.
Yeah. Pauline is off elsewhere. And then she comes back and asks me, oh, did you see that question? The one I just talked about for 20 minutes? Yeah.
Trying to keep us on the air.
This is how our conversations go in this house. I love this email message I received. I can't remember who it was from. It says, with all your contacts and insider information, do you know of a site that compiles climate change information and makes it available online with clippings and videos? With all your contacts and insider information. Do I have contacts? Do I have insider information? I don't think I do. And the only site I know about that makes this kind of information available online with clippings, I think meaning essays and videos, is Nature Bats Last, GuyMcPherson.com. And then finally, after asking the question, this person writes, I feel like this information is being deliberately withheld or underplayed. Yeah, I think so too. I think this has been the case for a long time, in fact. And I think it's too bad. Xavier, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. In major industrialized countries, do you think there are national government programs in place working on radically addressing climate warming issues when it becomes highly critical? If it's not already highly critical, I don't know what it takes. People are dying all over the globe as a result of lethal wet bulb temperatures, as a result of storms stronger than expected and stronger than we've ever experienced, in light of many hurricanes and all of the death and destruction that comes with them. So, I think it's already underway. I think that I don't think national governments are working on radically addressing climate warming issues. I think it's already highly critical. I think climate change is already well beyond the point of no return. I think it is killing millions of people already, based on the evidence I read. And there is no proven way to turn this thing around. So I think it will continue. Will governments or will governments put into place a plan? That would surprise me very much, because that would require acknowledging the dire nature of the situation. And I don't see that happening ever. I think that we are going to maintain our science fiction mentality and our hubris until the very end. In addition, I strongly suspect government leaders will not release full information. Consider, for example, the lack of information provided by the media and governments working hand in hand since at least the early 1900s. Consider the unwillingness to share information about the aerosol masking effect. Only now, nearly 100 years after the first paper I know about was published on the subject, only recently are we beginning to hear about the aerosol masking effect, or global dimming, from media outlets, and to a far lesser extent from government entities or agencies of any kind. And yes, 10 years seems like a very conservative time frame over which humans will become extinct. And by the way, Pool Bell, Charles Darwin never wrote Survival of the Fittest. And that whole meme, Survival of the Fittest, goes against everything he ever wrote. He never wrote about survival of the fittest. He wrote about survival of those most able to make changes as required. That has very little to do with the idea that has developed, which is survival of the strongest or the fittest somehow. All species are approximately equally fit. If you understand the idea of fitness from an evolutionary perspective, every species is ideally fit, ideally suited to its current environment. That's the way evolution by natural selection works. That's why you have species growing and living and thriving and reproducing where they do, is exactly because they're so well fit to that environment. There's an interaction there going on between the species and the environment that tends to stabilize the ability of species to live in that environment and also to stabilize the environment. This has nothing to do with, quote, survival of the fittest, which, as nearly as I can tell, has been turned into a social meme to make some people seem stronger, faster, better than others.
It was altruism that he noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, Pauline points out that Darwin and also Wallace noted, more importantly, altruism and the positive relationships between species than the negative interactions within a species. So I think that's an important thing to remember. I would encourage all of you watching to read some of the older literature from Wallace and Darwin, as difficult as it is to read that in our musco-faster modern English brains, because the writing style is a little awkward at times. Yes. Yes, John, I think you're right. We're waiting for Deus Ex Machina to save us. We're waiting for the machine of one kind or another to reach out and save us. Aliens, anybody? Thank you, Celestial Woodway, for joining this YouTube channel. Minty Green, thank you for the well wishes. Have you heard of the Great Reset conspiracy theory and any thoughts on it? Yes, of course, I've been hearing about the conspiracy theory, which is exactly that, about the Great Reset, as if there's some sort of intentional, as if there's some sort of intent to collapse the economy, to reset the economy, the industrial economy on Earth, to cause a whole bunch of people to die and therefore benefit the, quote, 1%. That's nonsense. How do you think those people make their money? How do you think they enjoy their privilege? Do you think maybe it has something to do with a bunch of poor people serving them meals on platters? Do you think it might have something to do with poor people jetting them all over the world and providing them access to experiences that you and I can't afford? Do you think it might have something to do with skimming a little off the top with every transaction that is made all over the globe? I think that might have something to do with it. I think the, quote, 1%, that you people are thinking are going to reset the economy, I think they're a lot smarter than you. I don't think they would ever do such a thing because they know about aerosol masking. And once you know about aerosol masking, you realize we cannot stop this thing. When you start asking for reduced or halted industrial activity, you're asking for an even more rapid extinction of humans and all life on Earth. I don't think the wealthy are interested in that. I think they're smart enough to know better. So, for that reason, as I have written in the peer-reviewed literature, it's hard for me to imagine that the COVID-19 epidemic is some sort of plot to reduce industrial activity and therefore cause a large die-off of humans. That makes zero sense. Once you understand aerosol masking, once you understand how close we are to the edge of losing habitat for humans and many other animals already. We're in the midst of at least the 8th mass extinction event. The informed know about this. The informed tend to be the ones who use their information to get a lot of money and therefore a lot of privilege. So those of you who are saying that they want some sort of reset, that the 1% are trying to kill off a bunch of us so that they can enjoy a little bit longer life, that's nonsense, unsupported by any evidence I've ever seen. If you can come up with rational evidence to support that idea, please send it to me right away, because I would be interested in that idea.
If that were true, they would legalize abortion. They would legalize suicide.
Right.
I mean, it's
Pauline is pointing out that if this were the case, they would legalize abortion. They would legalize homicide. They would legalize killing all kinds of people in all kinds of ways. And by the way, we already have a great way to kill people. We've been doing it for many generations. It's called military conflict. Have you heard of the military? That's how we kill people. We use nationalism to whip up a bunch of feverish action so that we can go kill a bunch of people. And if a few of our people get tossed into the mix of the dead in the end, do you think that really matters to the sociopaths pulling the strings of empire? I think not. So we have ways to kill people already. Why would we need a great reset? If there is a great reset underway, it's not to benefit the 1%. Celestial Woodway asks, would any university hire you as a professor now? Are you on a blacklist? Would you want to do that work again? I would love to do that work again. I strongly suspect I am blacklisted in one form or another. So as a result, nobody would hire me. I began applying for university positions within a couple of years after leaving active service at the University of Arizona, and didn't garner as much as an interview for the many dozens of applications I submitted. So I think that my approach is too radical for a college and university system that is not at all radical, that instead follows the conventional paradigm of infinite growth on a finite planet. So I don't think that's going to work for me. I would love for it to, but mistakes have been made. No representation. But Guy, they are asking for reduced pollution. So what makes you think they know about aerosol masking effect? I don't think you understand what reduced pollution means and the aerosol masking effect. They're asking for reduced pollution in response to environmental activism over the course of the last 6 decades, but only in relatively minor ways and only in what we call first world countries. I don't think anybody is seriously asking China to stop burning coal. I don't think anybody is seriously asking India to stop using fossil fuels so they can provide enough air conditioning to keep people alive during the summer. So, yes, there's this appearance pushed by social action over the course of the last several decades that something is being done. I can't imagine Richard Nixon wanted to clean up the atmosphere, or that he wanted to sign the many pieces of environmental legislation, pro-environmental legislation that he signed. But he did, because he was overcome by society by this notion that we cannot continue destroying the planet and also survive. But all of those efforts have done relatively little. The ongoing mass extinction event is evidence that humans are still having a profound impact on their environment, and that impact will reach us in the not too distant future. It was the senior author of the first paper to report that we're in the midst of a mass extinction event that, I believe in Science Advances, senior authored by Gerardo Ceballos. And in an interview coinciding with the release of that paper, Ceballos said, and I'm going to paraphrase here, humans will be among the first to go extinct. And yet here we are in the midst of a mass extinction event. Not that I watch a lot of television or read a lot of corporate news, but I've never seen any indication that the president or anybody at a high-ranking position in any federal government is asking us to do anything about the mass extinction event. We know that civilization is a heat engine. We've known this for a long time. There are at least 5 papers published by Tim Garrett in the peer-reviewed literature indicating that civilization is a heat engine. Anybody asking to slow it down? No, because the aerosol masking effect. Because that would, if we slow it down, we're only going to accelerate the ongoing mass extinction event. Oh yes, and tobacco companies have been really quite good at killing people. and and think about that. Do they want those people to die? No, those are their customers. Nobody wants to kill their customers. I actually took my first sabbatical leave at UC Berkeley, and they aren't radical. Not even close. And I agree. If they aren't radical, there aren't any radical universities in the USA. Actually, there might be a few, but they're not at that level. I mean, consider who is the chancellor or president or emperor or whatever she's called in charge of the UC system. Janet Reno, who formerly was governor in Arizona and then went on to become the person to head the, what is it called, Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security. If that isn't mainstream, I don't know what is. And she's now the Uber queen for the University of California system. And no representation. I think the part of you that thinks Trump wants reopening from lockdown because he knows about aerosol masking effect, I don't know that he knows, and I don't think that he really matters. I don't think that any president in the last 60 years has mattered much. Okay, let's say 57 years. And the last president who tried to matter much was assassinated about 57 years ago. And I do think that somebody in the federal government knows about the aerosol masking effect. I suspect a lot of people in the federal government know about the aerosol masking effect and are trying to maintain as much of the show worldwide as is possible while still funneling the money to the people who really, quote, matter in the grand scheme of things. And that ain't you and it ain't me. There's no lobby for the extinction event. That's right. I haven't seen one anyway. Not even the Sierra Club is lobbying to stop the extinction event. Well, you know, no representation, that I will only say what is on my mind and what's supported by evidence. So that's why you can ask me anything. Thanks for asking. I think there might be a few remaining small liberal arts colleges that would tolerate me for a short period of time, not for an extended period of time. And before the pandemic broke out, and also before 2017, when I was removed from public service through a defamation campaign, a well-orchestrated defamation campaign, I was able to visit many colleges and universities, dozens at least, with my message of near-term human extinction. So it was really the defamation campaign that did the job as far as taking me and my message out of circulation. Thank you for sharing the message, Aaron, on a college or university campus. And that's what I have wished for this whole time, is that people would take my evidence-rich message seriously and present it in a variety of formats. And at least in part because of the defamation campaign, that hasn't happened much. And I think that's too bad. I think if people knew what was coming, if they knew that even that we were in the midst of a mass extinction event and that our prospects of survival as a species were extremely low as a result of that being in the mass extinction event, if people knew that, then perhaps they would live differently. But apparently we can't even get that message out. Apparently that message is so dire that it's become taboo to speak about human extinction. Never mind the other species in the genus Homo. What is there, 7 or 8 that I've found and reported on so far that have already gone extinct? And I bet some of them thought they were pretty clever too. It's not just humans who think we're clever. It's not just Homo sapiens. It's other species in the genus Homo that undoubtedly thought they were pretty darn clever too. And yet, when you change the environment and you're unable to adapt to that altered environment, that's what Charles Darwin was talking about. That's what he was writing about, was the inability to keep up with those changes. That also is what Strona and Bradshaw were writing about in their 2018 paper in Scientific Reports, about the inability of species to keep up with rapid rates of environmental change. And that's why they point to the 5 to 6 degrees Celsius as being an extinction level event, because that's too fast in the short span, shorter than evolutionary change, shorter than genetic change in a species. That's too short a time period for a species to adapt. Janet Napolitano, yes, you're right. I'm sorry. My story involving the Director of Homeland Security, I said Janet Reno? Yeah, Janet Napolitano, whatever. Renos, Napolitanos. It's almost the same number of syllables. Sorry about that. Thank you for that correction, John McCubbin. Ms. Topper, I have given considerable thought to providing an online class, and we actually had it just about ready to go at one point, and then we got busy doing other things. And so what we are doing now, and I say we because Pauline is a fundamental part of me getting my message out. She's the professional videographer. She's the one who knows how all this stuff works. She's the one who is shining the light on my eyes and making me visible here before the camera. We have seriously thought about that, and so far what we have opted to do instead is to provide educational opportunities through 4 or 5 videos each week. And they tend to be relatively short, although we did one that was 18 and a half minutes. We tend to keep them relatively short because of the gnat-like attention span of the typical viewer in this society. Of course, this doesn't apply to the people watching this particular video, but other people who might be inclined to watch this video will find it too long. We'll skip through and look for a piece of confirmatory information that confirms what they already believe. And so far, anyway, we haven't created an online course of any kind. That may happen in the future. We'll see how long the future is, for one thing. Grateful Dan writes, the WWF, that's World Wildlife Fund, said we has said we have lost 60% of the vertebrate population in the past 50 years. Does this mean we are past the halfway point in the mass extinction event? At least at the level of vertebrates, yes. And you have to bear in mind that, as Ceballos pointed out in that interview in 2015, coincident with the release of the first paper about the first peer-reviewed paper being published about the mass extinction event, the organisms, quote, on top of the food chain will be the first to go. That's humans, that's vertebrates, that's mammals. And we are seeing a rapid decline in the number of vertebrates and mammals. And so it shouldn't come as a big surprise that that's happening. And yes, I think that will continue. You know, there was a United Nations report that came out that I frequently point to at guymcpherson.com. Came out in August of 2010, indicating that we're driving to extinction an estimated 150 to 200 species per day. If that doesn't scream mass extinction event, I don't know what does. And that was more than 10 years ago. So yeah, I suspect we're at least halfway into this mass extinction event. I'm a little surprised every Monday when we produce another video, starting the week on a Monday and producing 3 or 4 videos during the course of the week. I'm surprised we can do that every week. I'm surprised we have the infrastructure that allows that. I'm surprised I'm still alive. Maybe that makes me a fatalist. By definition, somebody who thinks they're going to die. Anthony, thank you very much for joining this channel as a member. Right. And then right away you start with a tough question, don't you? Could you mention your opinion on the increase in microbes that eat methane and whether this will lay down layers of limestone? I think that the increase in methane-eating organisms of any kind will be so short-lived that they will be unable to lay down layers of limestone, at least any notable layer of limestone. I just think that this ongoing mass extinction event is happening too quickly for there to be any measurable change. And not just because our time is short, but because the time is short for those methane-eating microbes as well. Perhaps I could lecture on the relationship between toilet paper and food in the age of a pandemic. I think that'd be a great idea. I said like 150 times, I bet I pointed out that if there's nothing going in, you don't need to worry about what's coming out. People seem a lot more concerned about toilet paper than about where their food is coming from.
But tell them about the bamboo paper we just got. It's really nice.
Pauline wants me to include a product placement advertisement here for bamboo toilet paper that we just got. Have you tried it?
Yes.
Well, she's tried it and she says it's very nice. I haven't tried it yet.
Talk about actually renewable. Bamboo grows so
Yes,
fast.
bamboo is renewable. It grows very quickly. I grew a bunch of it at the mud hut at the homestead in New Mexico, and because it grew very quickly. But I didn't make toilet paper out of it, by the way. I think we're doing just fine on toilet paper.
I think it's called What the Crap? Is that what it was?
Rate of change is something you really hit on, but people don't understand speed, which is interesting because we obsess on getting faster things. Cars, internet phones, computers, sports players, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's exactly right, isn't it? It's the entire society is the motto for the entire society can be summarized in 3 words: must go faster. And yet, when we have an ongoing extinction event, a mass extinction event, when we have rapid environmental change as a result of very rapid increased global average temperature, nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to think that's such a good thing. It's not a good thing. That's interesting, Aaron. Aaron writes, my husband and I decided not to buy a house because what's the point? And that's fascinating because we decided to buy a house because what's the point of living in Central Florida? Okay. Yes, I do have very slow internet connection, for which I apologize. We're doing the best we can here. There's no 5G in Florida. There's only 4G in the whole state.
And lots of COVID.
Oh, and by the way, there's lots of COVID. So those people who say 5G is triggering COVID haven't been to Florida. John asks, how long, weeks, months, do you expect the process of abrupt changes to collapse our independent global techno-civilized civilization? When do we expect civilization to fail, and when do we revert to banned survivalism? Well, I don't think we'll revert to anything because of the loss of aerosol masking that will result from even a reduction in industrial activity, never mind when industrial activity goes away. When the industrial revolution has reached its end, there will be no habitat for humans or much other life on the planet very shortly thereafter. So the idea of creating a band, as you see in television shows and movies all the time, is failure to recognize the aerosol masking effect. And how soon? When did civilization fail? My favorite thing lately when people ask me how much time they have is to point out that you have 3 minutes. And with every breath, you get a reset. So that's good news, as long as we keep breathing. I think you're some kind of Asperger guy. Thanks, Pool. Is that a compliment? I don't even know what that means. I'm an Asperger. I've not been diagnosed, except by you. Thank you, Grateful Dan. I'm grateful for your contribution. Michelle Henderson is defending me, claiming I know Aspie, and she would know, because we lived on the same property in Belize for 8 months and interacted on a daily basis during that time. And she's one of the smarter people I know. So if she says I'm no Aspie, then I'm no Aspie. I'm taking her word for it. I'm just reading through the list and there weren't any questions. Pauline is wondering why I'm not talking, because I always talk. I'm not going to read the whole thing because some of it's just silly.
Yeah, read those out loud. Like ice cream cake. I like that. That's Andrew's.
I like what Raza Eco Warrior says. Nothing personal, Guy, but we need to see more of Pauline, the better half. You're damn right about that. The significantly better half, the way better half, the out of the park better half. But if she weren't behind the camera, you wouldn't be seeing anything in front of the camera. If you put me behind the camera, you wouldn't see her in front of the camera. So that's just subscribe to her YouTube channel, Pauline Project Love, and then you can see her almost as much as I do.
Right.
Michelle, you have 5G Wi-Fi? Oh, you have 5G Wi-Fi. Yes, we have 5G Wi-Fi in the house. I was referring to, and it's not even, Pauline says it's not real 5G. I'm not going to get an argument between you two.
It's 5G ready.
In any event, we don't have widely distributed 5G. When I go out there with my phone into the world around Orlando, they don't have 5G towers. But you guys are going to have to fight this out on your own. I'm not getting in the middle of this. Okay, I think we're nearing the end of our rope here, at least the end of mine. So if anybody has a question, fire away. Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up within the next couple of minutes. Thanks, everybody, for commenting in the chat box. That means you're a member. I appreciate that. And thanks to everybody who will be watching this in the not-too-distant future for your ongoing support as well.
Thank you, everybody. Comedy is a very serious business. Yes, Raza.
Yes, Raza. Comedy is a very serious business. Oh, and here you go. The substantially better half is making an appearance.
That's so weird because
You gotta lean into
when
the
we
mic.
look at